You type on glass every single day. Your thumbs fly across a flat, featureless screen with no physical keys, no raised bumps, no click beneath your finger. And somehow it works. Somehow your brain learned to trust a surface that gives you nothing back. But this almost didn't happen. In fact, for most of the history of mobile phones, the idea of typing on glass was considered absurd. Laughable. Career suicide for anyone who suggested it seriously. And the reason the iPhone shipped without a keyboard has nothing to do with design trends or minimalism or aesthetics. It has to do with one executive walking into a lab, smashing a prototype with his bare hands, and saying the words that changed everything. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to go back to 2004. The smartphone world belonged to BlackBerry. Research in Motion, the Canadian company behind the device, had figured out something nobody else had. People wanted to send email from their pockets. The BlackBerry had a tiny physical keyboard with little keys you could feel under your thumbs. Professionals loved it. Lawyers, bankers, politicians, everyone who needed to type fast and type constantly was glued to those little buttons. By 2006, BlackBerry had sold over 8 million devices. Their revenue had tripled in 2 years. The keyboard wasn't just a feature. It was the entire identity of the smartphone. Without it, you weren't serious. You weren't professional. You were playing with a toy. So when a small team inside Apple started building what would become the iPhone, the first prototypes had keyboards too. This makes sense. You build what you know works. The project was codenamed Purple, and it was so secretive that the team had to pass through multiple badge-protected doors just to enter their own workspace. A sign on the door read, "Fight Club," a reference to the first rule being that you don't talk about it. The earliest Purple prototypes were essentially modified iPods. The team explored adding a physical click wheel, the same rotating disc that made the iPod iconic, to a phone. They tried miniaturized keyboards. They tested devices that looked like BlackBerry clones with Apple logos. None of them worked well. The click wheel couldn't navigate a phone interface. The tiny keyboards felt cramped and cheap. Steve Jobs, Apple's CEO, hated every version. Jobs had a specific philosophy that would seem irrational to most engineers at the time. He believed that any part of a device you couldn't use was wasted space. A keyboard that sat there permanently, taking up half the front of the phone whether you were typing or not, was a crime against design. He wanted the entire surface to change depending on what you were doing. When you were watching a video, the keyboard should disappear. When you were browsing the web, it should become a scrollable page. When you were typing, and only when you were typing, should a keyboard appear. But here's the problem. The touchscreen technology available in 2005 couldn't do this. Resistive touchscreens, the kind used in PDAs and early tablets, required you to press hard with a stylus or a fingernail. They couldn't detect the soft pad of a fingertip reliably, and they certainly couldn't detect multiple fingers at once. The team needed capacitive touch technology, which reads the electrical charge from your skin. But nobody had built a capacitive screen large enough for a phone and accurate enough for typing. This is where the story gets interesting. In 2005, a small company called Fingerworks had been developing multi-touch technology for years. Their founders, Wayne Westerman and John Elias, both from the University of Delaware, had published research on finger tracking and gesture recognition. They had built products like the iGesture Pad, a flat surface that could recognize multiple finger movements simultaneously. Apple quietly acquired Fingerworks in early 2006. The terms were never publicly disclosed. The entire team and all their patents were absorbed into the Purple project. Now Apple had the underlying technology to make a full touchscreen phone work, but they still didn't know if people would actually type on glass. Greg Christie, who led the human interface team, faced this exact problem. He had to design a software keyboard that felt natural without any physical feedback. No click, no bump, no raised edge to guide your thumb. His team built prototype after prototype, testing different key sizes, spacing, and response animations. They discovered something crucial: people didn't need to feel a key press. They needed to see a visual confirmation that their tap had registered. A brief highlight, a small pop-up letter. The brain could be tricked into trusting the glass if it got instant visual feedback. Then came autocorrect. The software keyboard would constantly misread your taps. Keys were too small for adult thumbs, so the team built a predictive algorithm that guessed which word you intended based on nearby key presses. This was not a minor feature. It was the thing that made the entire concept viable. Without autocorrect, the glass keyboard would have been unusable within minutes. In late 2006, the team had a working prototype with a full touchscreen and no physical keyboard. Steve Jobs held a meeting with his senior executives. According to Scott Forstall, who led the iPhone software division, Jobs asked each person what they thought. The responses were mixed. Some believed in the vision, others were terrified. The biggest fear came from the enterprise side of the business. BlackBerry users typed hundreds of emails per day on physical keyboards. How would these people react to a glass screen? Studies at the time showed that average typing speed on a physical smartphone keyboard was around 30 to 40 words per minute. The early software keyboard tests were showing speeds closer to 15 to 20 words per minute, half the speed. Tony Fadell, who led the iPod team and was deeply involved in the iPhone's hardware, later recalled that there were serious internal debates about offering two versions, one with a touchscreen and one with a slide-out physical keyboard. This would have been the safe play. Give the market what it already knew it wanted. But Jobs refused. He had seen this pattern before. When Apple launched the iMac in 1998 without a floppy disk drive, the industry called it insane. When they dropped the headphone jack from the iPhone 7 in 2016, people protested online for weeks. Jobs understood something that most product managers don't. Sometimes you have to remove what people think they need in order to show them what they actually want. The decision was final. One phone, full touchscreen. No keyboard, no fallback. On January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs stood on stage at Macworld in San Francisco and pulled the iPhone from his pocket. He showed the audience a device that was almost entirely screen. He scrolled through album art with his finger. He pinched to zoom on a photograph. He made a call while browsing the web. And then he showed the software keyboard. In the audience, Mike Lazaridis, the co-CEO of Research in Motion, was watching the keynote on a screen. He turned to Jim Balsillie, his co-CEO, and said that what Apple was showing was not possible, that the demo had to be faked, that there was no way a touchscreen phone could do all of that. BlackBerry had tested touchscreens internally and concluded they weren't ready for consumers. But it was ready. And on June 29, 2007, when the iPhone went on sale, people lined up outside Apple stores for days. In the first weekend, Apple sold 270,000 units. Within 6 months, they had sold over 3 million. The typing speed problem? It solved itself. People adapted. Within weeks, most iPhone users were typing just as fast as they had on BlackBerry keyboards. The autocorrect algorithm improved with each software update. By 2009, studies showed that experienced iPhone users were matching or exceeding their old physical keyboard speeds. BlackBerry didn't believe it. Their internal data told them that enterprise customers would never abandon physical keyboards. They released the BlackBerry Storm in 2008 with a clickable touchscreen, a screen that physically depressed when you pressed it. It was a compromised device, trying to bridge the old world and the new one. It satisfied nobody. By 2013, BlackBerry's market share had collapsed from nearly 50% to less than 3%. The company that once owned the smartphone market was irrelevant. Today, every major smartphone on Earth uses a full touchscreen with no physical keyboard. Samsung, Google, Xiaomi, OnePlus, every single one follows the template that Apple established in that one decision in 2006. Even BlackBerry eventually switched to full touchscreens before exiting the hardware business entirely in 2020. You never think about this when you type a text message. You never wonder why your phone doesn't have buttons. You just tap the glass and trust it. Your thumbs move on autopilot, guided by a decade and a half of muscle memory and autocorrect algorithms that quietly fix every mistake you make. But underneath your daily typing is the ghost of 100 prototypes that failed. A company called Fingerworks whose research made it possible, and one executive who was willing to bet the future of a company on the idea that people would learn to love typing on nothing. Every time you pick up your phone and type without looking, you are proving him right. The keyboard didn't disappear because it was old technology. It disappeared because someone had the nerve to tell you that you didn't need it, and then built something so good you forgot you ever did.